Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. I'm Roger, and today, man, we are doing something totally different. I want you to completely step away from the loud, chaotic noise of your everyday life. Just leave it all behind for a second. We're venturing into a world that is completely, absolutely untouched by humanity. Picture this. You're standing in the absolute heart of the dense Indian jungle. It's the kind of place where the tree canopy is so incredibly thick that sunlight barely even touches the ground. It's wrapped in this thick, mysterious morning fog, and it's sliced up by these winding, deep rivers. Today, we're exploring a dramatic, entirely hidden narrative of survival. It's a story about family, it's about constant lurking danger, and it's all centered around what I like to call a silent kingdom. So let's dive right in. Think about it like this. Out there are no cities. There are absolutely no humans around to help you out. And there definitely aren't any rules written down on paper telling you what's right and what's wrong. Actually, there is literally only one rule that matters out here, and that rule is survival, period. The jungle doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care if you're having a bad day. It's this primal, unforgiving arena where life and death are constantly separated by, just a split-second decision, or even something as tiny as a single snapped twig underfoot. And right at the very center of this massive, unforgiving world is a family that totally rules the landscape, but they do it without wearing a crown. We are talking about the incredible tiger pride. Now, I know what you might be thinking. When most of us picture big cats out in the wild, our minds instantly go straight to lions, right? We picture them out on the savannah, living in these huge, noisy, super visible groups. They're loud, they're boisterous, everybody knows exactly where they are. But tigers? Man, tigers are an entirely different story altogether. By their very nature, they are solitary creatures. They like to be alone. However, during some incredibly rare and absolutely crucial periods of their lives, a mother tiger and her newborn cubs will actually form a very specific, totally hidden unit. It's a family bond, sure, but it is bound by absolute total secrecy. It's not a noisy group like the lions. It's the stealthy, practically invisible force moving through the underbrush. So, what we're looking at here isn't a pride defined by roaring and making a big scene. No way. It's a pride built entirely on silence and just immense, raw strength. Within this totally hidden family unit, the mother tiger is everything. She plays so many roles. She acts as this master teacher, a fiercely dedicated protector, and literally the absolute only shield her vulnerable cubs have against a massive jungle that essentially wants to consume them. It's just her against the world, and she navigates this foggy, river-cut terrain we talked about with just an unmatched level of precision. It's honestly like watching a masterclass in survival, day in and day out. To really grasp the stakes here, you have to understand how these tigers start their lives. When tiger cubs are born, they are completely 100% blind. They're helpless. They're entirely dependent on their mother for everything. Here's a super surprising fact for you. For the first 2 full weeks of their lives, these tiny cubs rely entirely on their sense of smell and touch just to know what's going on around them. Because they are so incredibly vulnerable in those early days, the mother absolutely cannot leave them alone for very long. If she does, they're done for. So to keep them safe, she actually shifts her entire routine. She hunts almost exclusively under the thick cover of night, and she is always rushing back to the den before the daytime dangers can discover where she's hidden her babies. The thing is, the jungle definitely doesn't give you a grace period to figure things out. So literally as soon as those cubs' eyes finally open to the world, their hardcore education begins. And the mother's curriculum? Well, it's incredibly simple, but it is deadly important. First up on the syllabus, they have to learn how to stay completely, utterly silent. Second, she teaches them exactly how to move their paws without breaking a single dry leaf on the forest floor. Think about how hard that is. And third, they have to learn how to actively sense danger long before it ever becomes visible to their eyes. It's fascinating, really. She isn't teaching them how to roar or show off. She's teaching them the absolute precise mastery of stealth. Out here in the wild, every single sound they hear is a critical lesson, and every shifting shadow they see is a massive warning. Because guys, let me tell you, the jungle is never, ever empty. You've got leopards sitting perfectly still, just watching silently from the upper branches of the trees. You have wild dogs that move so efficiently in these highly lethal coordinated packs. And honestly, even other adult tigers represent a massive, terrifying threat to these little cubs. In this harsh environment, there are 0 second chances, no do-overs. If a cub makes one careless step out of the shadows or snaps a twig at the wrong time, that's enough to end their life right then and there. The stakes literally could not be higher. But, time marches on. As the cubs start to grow and need way more food, the mother is forced to start making these short hunting trips during the daylight hours. She has to leave them hidden, usually tucked away in some incredibly thick, tall grass, or maybe deep inside a dark, rocky cave. And when she walks away, she is basically trusting the jungle to keep them hidden. But she's smart. She knows she can never fully trust it, not for a second. So for the very first time in their young, fragile lives, the cubs are left entirely alone, and they have to put everything they've learned so far to the ultimate test.
Like I said before, the jungle just does not pause for innocence. It doesn't care that they're babies. So I want you to imagine this for a second. Imagine being a tiny tiger cub, left totally alone in that dense underbrush. All of a sudden, you hear it, a sharp rustle in the bushes nearby. Your ears perk up. Is it just the wind blowing through the leaves? Is it a bird digging around for insects? Or is it a predator that just picked up your scent? Without their mother's huge comforting presence there to shield them, they have absolutely nothing to rely on except that one core lesson drilled into their heads. Stay completely, perfectly still. Don't make a single sound.
And then, things get even more intense. A low, distant growl suddenly echoes through the dense trees. It's amazing how even the wind feels totally different when you're out there alone, right? It suddenly carries the cold scent of threats that you can't even see yet. The cubs intuitively react. They press their small bodies as tight against the dirt floor as they possibly can, and they wait. In that deep, terrifying silence, pure fear actually becomes their most important teacher. It forces them to truly understand, on a primal level, that the jungle all around them is fully alive, and it is always, always hungry. Now, let's fast forward to a specific day. On this day, the mother has to leave a bit earlier than usual to find food. The cubs do exactly what they're supposed to do. They remain perfectly hidden in their spot. But as time drags on, something in the atmosphere starts to change. You can almost feel it. The jungle just starts to feel heavier. It feels louder and uncomfortably close. An hour passes, then two, then more, and there is still no return from Mom. For the very first time in their existence, these cubs start to experience a totally suffocating, paralyzing emotion. Absolute, raw uncertainty. Where is she? Is she ever coming back? At this point, time is really starting to play against them. First, the late afternoon hits and the entire forest gets bathed in this fiery, vibrant orange light. It's beautiful, but it means the day is ending. Then comes dusk, and all that orange bleeds away into a cold, shadowy, unpredictable gray. And finally, the worst part, nightfall hits, and the forest turns completely pitch black. And here's the terrifying thing about the jungle at night. With the darkness, every single sound gets wildly amplified. A simple snapping branch suddenly sounds like a gunshot. A rustling leaf sounds like heavy footsteps. And through all of this sensory overload, their mother is still not back. You can imagine the absolute panic that starts to set in for these little guys. The cubs' breathing becomes so much faster, their tiny hearts just absolutely hammering inside their chests. It takes everything they have, but they know they must stay silent. And folks, this right here, this is the absolute hardest lesson of the jungle. It's not about how fast you can run away. It's definitely not about how fiercely you can fight back. It is entirely about the agonizing, brutal discipline of simply waiting. Because when you're a cub in the pitch-black Indian jungle, giving into panic and making a sudden, noisy movement means almost certain death. And then, after hours of this intense anxiety, the night finally reaches its absolute peak. The ambient noise of the insects and the birds just drops off entirely. The jungle goes completely, terrifyingly still. Just think about that kind of quiet for a second. The deep, heavy claustrophobia of the silent jungle basically wraps completely around them. There is no rustling anymore. There is absolutely no wind. There is literally only the pitch dark, the beating of their own hearts, and the excruciating wait to see what happens next. But suddenly, a sound cuts right through that heavy silence. It's a low sound, a deep, highly controlled growl. Instantly, the cubs completely freeze in place. Every muscle tightens up. But then, their ears twitch. They recognize that sound. The mother has finally returned. She slowly emerges from the thick, black shadows, moving so carefully, looking incredibly powerful and perfectly calm, and she's carrying a successful hunt right there in her jaws. The relief is palpable. Instantly, that absolutely terrifying, suffocating atmosphere just evaporates into thin air. The jungle feels totally different again. It feels safe. Well, at least for right now. Of course, the cubs immediately rush toward her. They are absolutely desperate for comfort, and obviously they're starving. But here is where you see the true nature of the tiger pride. Because even in victory, even when they've got food and they're reunited, danger never ever fully leaves the jungle. While the starving cubs tear into their meal, the mother doesn't relax at all, not even a little bit. She remains totally rigid, her ears are constantly swiveling back and forth like radar dishes, and her eyes are intensely scanning the dark tree line for glowing eyes. Her unending protective instincts are just on full display. She will only let herself rest after she is absolutely 100% certain her babies are safe. And the crazy thing is, this incredibly high-stakes, nerve-wracking night, it's just one tiny part of their relentless, ongoing daily routine. It's a strict, unforgiving cycle of survival that they repeat every single day. Hunt, protect, teach, survive. Over and over and over again. But day after day, week after week, this brutal, demanding cycle is exactly what slowly transforms these helpless, blind little cubs into incredibly sharp, fast, completely independent apex predators. They are literally being forged by the heat and the pressure of the jungle, and they'll keep learning until the very day they finally outgrow the need for her protection. When you really stop and look at this family dynamic, it fundamentally redefines what we generally think of when we talk about strength in the wild. Mere power is just about brute force, it's got physical dominance, just being the absolute biggest, the meanest, and the loudest animal in the room. But true jungle strength? That is something entirely different, my friends. True jungle strength is patience. It is having an insanely acute awareness of your surroundings. And, above all, it's the immense, unwavering sacrifice of a mother protecting her young against all odds. The tiger pride survives and thrives not because it's the loudest, but because it is easily the smartest and the most deeply disciplined. So really, all of this incredible effort, all of the stealth and the waiting, it all boils down to one incredibly simple, inescapable truth. The jungle does not forgive weakness. At all. It only respects survival. The wild out there seriously doesn't care about your potential or your intentions. It only cares about your execution. Can you stay quiet? Can you wait? And somewhere deep, deep in the thickest parts of the Indian forest, right at this very second, that silent kingdom continues on. It is incredibly powerful, it is fiercely alive, and it is ruling its massive domain without ever needing to announce its presence to the rest of the world. All right, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. We live in a modern world, a hyper-connected society that constantly celebrates loudness, high visibility, and just making as much noise as possible to get noticed, right? But looking at these magnificent creatures, what can we learn from the immense power of a totally silent kingdom? The tiger pride totally proves that sometimes the absolute greatest strength you can possess lies not in being the loudest voice in the room, but in your patience, your resilience, and your silent, sharply focused execution. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Keep learning, keep exploring the hidden wonders out there, and I will see you guys on the next explainer.